say it every time, and it's a bit of a cliche, but I'm always excited when we've got a guest that's to do with sport, obviously. But this time, I'm even more excited because it's not just any sport, it's my, well, previous sport, athletics. We've got someone on who's been around in the world of athletics for quite a long time, quite a lot of international championship experience, but soon he will be competing at his first ever Paralympics. And I think that's an amazing feat in itself because I know just how difficult the visually impaired athletics classes are. So, welcome to the show, visually impaired sprinter Zac Shaw.
Hi. Hi.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. We always start off with the kind of standard question. Just tell us a little bit about you and your visual impairment and how it affects you.
Yeah, so I actually grew up with perfect vision. It wasn't till I was around maybe like 9 or 10 years old that I noticed my vision getting worse. But yeah, when I was 13, I was diagnosed with a rare eye condition called Stargardt's disease, which is like a form of macular degeneration, but a juvenile version. And yeah, kind of just from there, it was obviously brought its own challenges, probably in like early adolescence, having to deal with secondary school and then lose my vision. So yeah, it's been a journey.
How does Stargardt's affect your vision?
Sorry, that was the actual question, wasn't it?
Oh no, sorry.
So it's the center of my vision. So my peripheral vision isn't affected, although in your peripheral, like you can't really see too much anyway. So it affects my acuity, which is how clearly and how far I can see. And I also have just like lots of varying different blind spots, which I work around.
Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting actually. I feel like Stargardt's is one of those kind of more common conditions that we seem to hear about. I mean, Eric always talks about his being RP being one of those that's quite popular, but I feel like Stargardt's is up there in the rankings at the moment. But athletics, let's get down to the good stuff. How did you get involved in it?
Well, funnily enough, it was actually before London 2012. Before I guess the big hype about Paralympic sport happened. Someone actually came into the school and they were doing this, like, I think they were basically trying to recruit as many potential para athletes as possible in the lead up to London, and just like offered me to like a little trial day in my hometown of Grimsby. But obviously when I went there, I was quite clearly the most able person because I wasn't physically affected. And to be honest, I felt a bit out of place. I didn't really resonate with myself as having a disability. So it was a bit challenging at first, like to actually get into the sport because I firstly had to come to terms with my own disability, which I'd only had for like a year or two at that point. And then also to come to terms with the fact that like I'm not just having my disability, I'm embracing it and showing off to the world. So it was a bit of a challenge at first.
That can really take a lot from someone that's also grown up with someone like sight that started to degenerate as a sort of youngish adult. Yeah, it's quite scary, isn't it? Opening yourself up to let other people know that you have the disability. Did you just
Yeah,
have?
no, sorry, go Karen.
I was just going to say, was that something that you really struggled with at first?
Yeah, I did because like I mean, like personally for me, it was in school, and school's a scary place, especially secondary school. And you don't want to be different. That's just how it is. Like you don't want to be the different kid in school. And at first, yeah, I wasn't brave enough to be that person. But like I'm really lucky. I had really great school, great friends, and I mean, I shouldn't have to say this, but I was never bullied. Like it shouldn't be like a thing to be like, oh wow, I wasn't bullied, but unfortunately, that's a reality of what kids can be like. But yeah, it definitely was a challenge.
Did you tell people about it at first when you started training?
Yeah, because to be honest, when I actually started training, I was about 17 or 18, so I was a bit older at that point. In school, I mean, I had no choice but to tell people because in year seven, I didn't go to any lessons because when when I first started year seven, we had this maths teacher who just used to write the sums on the board. He used to be dead silent, and I obviously couldn't see the whiteboard. So I asked the girl next to me, like, "Oh, what does it say?" and it was dead silent, and she just pointed to the board and said, "It's up there." And obviously I couldn't
Mm.
see it. And at that point I just like burst out crying, left the school that day, and then for like the next 6 months I wasn't in lessons. So I had no choice, because when I came back in year 8, I kind of just had to accept that I do need some help.
I know it was new to you at the time, but did like athletics with other people that have, I know you said you were slightly more abled, but with other people that have a disability, did you feel a bit more at home there?
I did, yes. Well, when I first started training, like there wasn't anyone around where I was from that had any sort of impairment. So I was training in a predominantly, well, I say predominantly, I was the only person that had a disability when I trained. But being visually impaired, obviously I'm not impaired to the point where I'm not as quick as other people. Um, so I had that in my advantage. And then, to be honest, when I first started going on like disability camps with British athletics and meeting people with different impairments, and then like Selina said, like with Stargarts, I remember meeting Libby Clegg for the first time, who had Stargarts, and she was the first person I ever met like that was visually impaired, let alone the same condition. So when I was around that point, it almost gave me a bit of hope, knowing that other people have these impairments and they're so happy and they're so content with it, and it gave me a lot of confidence moving forward.
Awesome. Selena, do you want to just ask a little bit about the run up to Paris?
Yeah, so obviously this is going to be your first Paralympics, but you've been in athletics a long time. Just let us know like what championships you've been to in the lead up. I guess why unfortunately you haven't been able to go to a Paralympics before now.
God, yeah, it's been a long one. So I, like I said, started in London. That on the back of that was when I took it seriously, and I was so inspired from London 2012, like seeing all the incredible people like Johnny Peacock, Libby, Hannah Cockcroft, like watching them all inspired me so much. So my dream was to go to Rio, which I know sounds crazy, because I gave myself 3 years to try and make a Paralympics on the back of London, which is in hindsight a bit silly, but I did end up making the team for World Championships in 2015, which was the year before Rio. So I was in such a strong position to make that team for Rio. So when I didn't make it, because it was very close, very close whether I made it or not. It was like the most heartbreaking thing that ever happened to me. It's just I still struggle with it to this day. And from there, it kind of just broke me down, because everything that I'd ever wanted, and the whole reason I started, didn't happen. And then obviously I could build myself back up for Tokyo. I made world champs, Commonwealths, Europeans in between that period. So when it got to Tokyo, I'd I'd got myself to the point where I'd medaled at Europeans individually. I'd got myself in a really strong position. But for whatever reason, I wasn't selected. But I was made the first reserve for Tokyo. So that one was tough to take, because I wasn't selected, but I also had a 3 and a bit week gap where I might have been selected, because I was the first reserve. Someone could have got injured. We could have been given an extra slot. And that was an incredibly tough situation to be in. Because like they say, it's the hope that kills you. But then, to be honest, I think they've been very tough experiences, but I think they've helped me as a person and as an athlete, because I've experienced what I feel like is a quite difficult situation twice. So now, like emotionally, I'm much more stable. I'm much more level-headed. I'm much more rational than I used to be. And I think that has helped me make this team at Paris. And I think the difference is now is I'm not going to Paris as someone that's happy to make the team. I'm going there as someone that's medaled at the previous 2 World Championships. I'm going there as someone that wants to win a medal. So it's a very different mindset of not making a team to now, oh, I'm at Paralympics and like you really want to come home with a medal. So it's been a bit of a shift over the past like few years.
Yeah, that sounds like an intense kind of career really to date. And I guess the question is, why didn't you give up? What kept you going? What kept you in the sport?
Do you know, I've been asked this a few times, and I actually don't have the answer. I think the answer for me is it's just a dream of mine to make a Paralympics. And like, I say this because, and it sounds strange, but I don't feel motivated. And I don't mean that in a way of I'm not motivated to go to training, because I am. The point I mean is I do it because I love it. I don't go through waves of, oh, I'm motivated for this, I'm not motivated. I just love the sport. It's given me so much. And even if I was to have retired not being a Paralympian, I would have still been super happy with my career, because it's like I've met my partner through it. I've met some of my best friends. It's taken me to so many places that I never even thought I'd do. It's developed me as a person. So yeah, I think it's because I didn't need the title of being a Paralympian to be content. And I think that's just what's kept me going.
Hmm. See, that's interesting to hear because you say that's kept you going, and yet you keep putting in that effort as if that's like, that's always been the end goal. So it almost seems a little bit like that is the thing that drives you as well. Is there even a little part of you that just goes, I just want to get there? That's, that was your dream from the off.
Yeah, and this is where I'm conflicted, to be honest, because I don't know if it's become a coping mechanism of mine to almost tell myself I don't need it. But I can only say how I feel, because it doesn't feel like I need it. But you do raise a good point, because when I got the phone call to say I was going for Paris, I burst out crying. Like, I could not stop myself for like 5 minutes. I was just on the floor crying. My girlfriend was like, you're not selected. What's going on? Because I couldn't talk. I was just crying. And I was like, this means so much to me. Like, it obviously means so much to me, but I've been through some experiences which have felt quite difficult to take, that my body's almost shut off from it a little bit. And it's helped me so much, because on a competition point of view, because now I don't compete with that emotion of what if something goes wrong, what if this happens. I can just keep it quite bare and just compete. But no, it does mean a lot to me. But I think I got to a point where I didn't need it. I wanted it, but I didn't need it.
Do you think that was potentially because of the two previous setbacks that you just thought, I really, really do want to go, but you're probably more in a better mindset this time out, with it being the third one, that if it doesn't happen, it might be easier to cope?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Like, the past two times have been, I mean, it's funny to talk about, because in perspective of life, there's so many worse things that can happen that than not making a team that you train for. But it's more the getting out of bed and every day, like, striving for a goal. And when you fail on that goal or don't achieve what you want to, it's becomes something that it is quite a challenging situation. Especially like when your best friends are there and you're watching the TV and you're not just supporting people, like, you're supporting some of your best friends. So yeah, the past two times have definitely been something that's affected me, but I like to try and hope it's in a positive way.
I mean, to be fair, it does seem that way. Like I say, when you mentioned the setbacks and your mindset sort of made you stronger from that point. If we move on to the actual event, I mean, Selina obviously knows a lot about this. She's competed in Commonwealth before, but for people like me or other listeners out there, how is it different for a person with a visual impairment to say someone that's doing athletics in the Olympics?
Um, so if we strip it back to just the basic event of being stood in the starting blocks, if we just forget about the training, we're like, hey, we're stood in the starting blocks, we're in a stadium at the Paralympics. I think the difference is, and I mean, in all levels of visual impairment will vary, right? Because I guess, like, Selina was a T11 athlete, so you're covered with a blindfold, so you can't see a thing. With my level of impairment, I don't compete with a guide or a blindfold. I just compete with my vision. So a lot of the time, like, someone will say to someone, like, look, pick somewhere at the finish line and you're just running towards that. And they say that as in, like, forget where you are in the race. It's just you by yourself. I struggle to do that because I can't tell where I am in a race. I can't tell if I'm 50 meters in or 70 meters in, because I can't necessarily tell how far I'm from the finish line. And that's something that I think I struggle with the most, because there's a lot of races I've lost on the dip because I'll dip to the line too early, I'll dip too late, I'll think I'm too close to the line, and then end up like reaching for it. And I think that's one of the things I struggle with. Like, I mean, there's studies that are out there which are trying to find out if, because if you're visually impaired naturally with your feet, you'll keep them slightly in front of you, like you don't want to like walk into something. So it's like, imagine you were walking around the house with the lights off, your feet would be a bit more like tentative. So there's studies about potential foot contact times being slightly longer than they would be for someone with sight, balance. Again, if you're standing on one leg, try it with your eyes closed. It's a lot more challenging. So there's definitely little things, and these things might be 1%, but when you add a few 1% up, it can hold you back a little bit more than I think you realize.
And obviously you compete in the T12 classification, which is kind of the middle of the VI classes. And you do have the option of competing with a guide runner if you wish. Is there any reason why you've never gone down that avenue?
I mean, obviously, like with guide runners, firstly, they're not easy to find. And then not just that, it's not easy to find one that's quick enough for your level because, am I right in saying ideally they'd like to be a second faster than your PB over 100? So for me, like, I'd have to find someone that runs 9.8 seconds.
True.
So it's not easy. And if someone's running that quick, they're not going to be focusing on guide running. They've got an Olympics to go to. So that's one reason. The other reason is I've never felt like I've needed one. So I've always tried to be as independent as I can. And there might be a day where I can't complete 100 meters without a guide. And when that day comes, I will obviously seek one. But I think for the moment, while I'm able to run independently, it's something I'd like to do.
That's fair enough. And I'm curious because does the colour of the track make a difference to you? Like I've heard the one in Paris is purple or something. I don't think it's not like the African violet of Loughborough, but do you think that's going to impact like the contrast between the white lines and the colour of the track compared to a regular track?
To be honest, I find it more the lighting of the actual, just the lighting of the stadium, and the glare off the track. Because I mean, sometimes like you can have the standard tartan coloured tracks with the pure white lines, but if the sun's glaring on it, it becomes quite difficult. So I think it's less so the colour for me and more so the lighting.
So then does it impact you if you're racing in the daytime or evening under floodlights or natural daylight? What's your preference?
My preference would 100% be evening. I find, well, to be honest, it's probably in the past 12 to 18 months now, like I really struggle to race without sunglasses, especially if it's daylight. That's something I used to be able to do. But yeah, sometimes like when the sun's just beaming on you, it's just so difficult to concentrate on the lines.
Yeah, that's interesting. And also, you're not just going to be competing in the 100 meters in Paris. You're going to hopefully be part of the mixed relay. Explain to people what that is and how it all works.
Okay, you're testing me here.
Yeah, no.
I can explain it, but I'll try and explain it in 30 seconds. So basically, the mixed relay is 2 males and 2 females. There's no order in which gender that they go in. Leg 1 is someone with a visual impairment. Leg 2 is an amputee or someone with a limb impairment. Leg 3 is someone with a neurological disability that's ambulant. So, for example, cerebral palsy, multiple sclerosis. And leg 4 is a wheelchair athlete. Any wheelchair athlete, so spinal injury or neurological. And there are some more complexities to it. For example, you can only have 2 high classes, but that's getting into the details, which makes it quite complex. But effectively, yeah, it's got to be in that order, and 2 males and 2 females.
I didn't actually know about the high classes bit. That's interesting. But yeah, I think you explained that way better than I could have. But it's quite a new event, isn't it? I mean, was it at the last Paralympics? I can't even remember now. Was that the first time it was in, wasn't it, at the last Paris?
Yeah. So they had it in Berlin at Europeans in 2018. And that was a trial event. And then, yeah, they had it in in Tokyo. Probably helped that the fact it was delayed by a year for COVID, because it probably gave more countries just another year to, I guess, come to terms with the event and the rules of it. But yeah, I mean, Great Britain won a silver in Tokyo.
Yeah, definitely no hopes again.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a really strong team.
Are these events dangerous? I'm just thinking in the sense of you got a lot of people with a visual impairment, some of them with or without guide runners, all run into like a certain point. You mentioned yourself, you're not always sure where the finish line is. Does it ever get to the point where people collide?
Well, I think that's why they keep the visually impaired people in the wheelchairs as far away as possible.
Oh, yeah, obviously yeah, that as well, but also I've just
Um,
even in like your sprint races.
Yes, so just for example, in the relay, like I passed a Johnny Peacock, which I still find crazy considering I grew up watching Johnny. But like I generally in a relay, the incoming runner, so me, would shout to the outgoing runner, Johnny, like when to go. Like, so there'd be a piece of tape on the floor. When I hit that tape, I should shout go, and then Johnny would go. It's a bit different because I can't see the tape, so Johnny has to control the changeover. So he has to look over his shoulder, and then as soon as he sees me hit the tape, he'll go. So for me, it's easy because Johnny's super experienced. He'll make sure he controls it. Like he'll make sure that it's a safe changeover, and it's just trust. Like we practice it multiple times throughout the year. But it does come down to trust, and I guess understanding my limitations as a visually impaired person.
And there's no buttons involved, is there, in the mixed relay? It's not that we're not going to do it.
It's a good point. Yeah, no baton, so you just got to touch. Some countries touch hands, but we choose to just straight palm of the hand on the back.
With regards to Paris, how do you fancy your chances?
I mean, I'm happy to say that I'm going there to try and win a medal. The challenging thing is in my classification, and like Selina knows this, it's only 4 people make the final because they have a lane either side for potential guide runners. So the hardest thing is making the final because generally, let's say there's 3 semi-finals, it would be the winner of each semi-final, but then there'd only be one fastest loser spot across the whole of them. Now, like obviously you're seeing in the Olympics now they have the repechage rounds. One of the reasons that's there is like sometimes one heat might get a stronger wind than the other. So you might be an equal playing field in terms of abilities, but if someone gets a stronger wind, they've got a stronger chance of making the final. So a lot of it does come down to a bit of luck. If I have a bit of luck on my side and I perform, I'm hoping I can get a medal. But ultimately, I think whatever happens, I'll be able to hold my head up high and say I'm a Paralympian, and no one will ever be able to take that away from me.
Definitely. Who do you think is your main competition going into this Paralympics?
So in my classification, there's 2 people that are probably going to be fighting for gold. I've got Noah Malone from the US, and there's a new Turkish guy. Them 2 are like a couple of tenths faster than everyone else. So I think unless anything crazy happens, I'd imagine them 2 would be fighting for gold and silver. There's a group of quite a few of us that are fighting out for a bronze medal. So it's just trying to, just be the best of everyone else.
You know, when you're training for these events, is the gold always the target, or is like the medal the target?
Neither, to be honest.
Oh, okay.
Do have to be dead honest with you. If you go into it with just the sole mindset of medals, it's great, but it's how do you get there? And for me, it becomes down to the technical stuff. So if you peel it back layer by layer and take it back from the first bit, so okay, the gun goes, how quick can I react? The first few steps, can I stay relaxed? Can I make sure I drive properly? When you get upright, can I make sure I stay relaxed, hold my top speed? Can I make sure at 80 meters I don't tense up, I don't lose speed? Because ultimately, if all you go there for is a medal, it's not a true gauge of success. Because if you perform to your best and do a personal best and don't win a medal, there's nothing you can do. So you just, yeah, that's what I find.
I totally agree with that. Exactly how I used to run 100 as well. You just go through your phases and
Yeah.
see what happens at the end.
No, but you have to, like, it's because people will like people like run a time and they're like, oh, I'm not happy with the time, but there's more context to it. It's not like an Excel spreadsheet. A lot of different things can happen in a race, right?
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned repechage earlier, obviously, that they've got on the Olympics. Is that going to be in the Paralympics then? We taking that on, but instead of having fastest losers?
No, I don't think so. And I'd imagine the reason would be because the timetable's already quite saturated. So I imagine if they had repechage rounds, it'd go on for about a month.
Very true.
However, they do have a new thing where, so let's say 8 people make the final and you're the 9th fastest qualifier. You can go to the warm-up track, and if someone pulls out of the event during or before call room, you can get like subbed into that final. That I think that's a new thing that hasn't been there previously.
Yeah, I've not heard that before. That's quite good. At least, yeah. So at least you've not got any empty lanes in the final. Makes it.
I think that's the point. Yeah.
Yeah, more interesting. Sorry, I can just go on technical aspects. So if you got any more questions, please.
I was just going to ask you a little bit. Selina mentioned earlier a little bit outside of Paralympics and sort of raising awareness for it. And she mentioned that potentially you think that it doesn't get the credit it deserves, and you do things to help raise awareness for that. So what sort of things is it potentially that you're looking at doing?
I get incredibly frustrated because there's so many things. It's a chain effect, yeah, how I see it. And we don't get, so para athletes will complain that we don't get opportunities, which is a knock-on effect of we don't get sponsorships. And by the way, just for clarity, I'm sponsored by Puma. They've been great to me, but just to give context, I'm not being bitter here. I'm talking just for the general benefit of the sport.
It's okay. You can say you want to be sponsored by Ray-Bans for your sunglasses.
The Puma got good sunglasses. No, but
you got Puma. All right, okay, yeah, nice.
But the point I mean is, I'm not being bitter and saying I'm not sponsored. This is just my genuine love for the sport. So we can say we don't get opportunities, which leads to we don't get sponsorships. But then agents won't take us on. So I've seen multiple occasions where you'll have world tours or whatever it may be at different events, and the lineup some of them will include para races, and the lineup, the quality is so poor. So then they'll put that race on. They might even put a little bit of prize money on. They see the lineup's quite poor. They won't put it on next year. Or if they do put it on next year, the spectators have already watched it. They're like, oh, this event's not that good. Like, they just look like they're ticking a box. So I get quite frustrated because I'm like, why would the agents not take on the para athletes? They can get some money from prize money along the way. These races can then be fuller. And if these races are better, more events will include more races. And then again, if we're in more races, higher quality events, sponsorships will come along. We're seeing at Diamond Leagues now, like, we are getting a few races. Like, we had some, there was in Eugene this year, London, Oslo. But like for example, the London Diamond League's just British athletes, which is fine because in Britain we have some amazing athletes, so we can get away with just a national race. Other events, like I think there'll be one in Brussels, there might just be Belgian athletes. Now, that for me doesn't necessarily grow the sport. I think we have to look at getting our best athletes in the biggest races to promote the sport. But that again comes with a different problem because from the public's perspective, the best athletes are the ones that run the fastest, which is very discriminatory to the more impaired athletes who cannot run that fast due to their disability. So it's a bit of a predicament that we're almost in an in-between phase where we're not actually doing anything well at the moment. We're doing a few things, but we're not doing anything well. So I'm quite passionate about it because I find it quite frustrating.
Do
Yeah.
you find Paralympics is missing like a breakout star? Like, in certain sports, like you've got Michael Jordan for basketball or Tiger Woods for golf, and they're synonymous across the world. If you had someone like that, and unfortunately there probably has been one, but unfortunately they're now in prison and they might have got out. But do you know what I mean? Someone in a positive light for Paralympics, do you think that would help generate awareness for it?
Yeah, I do. But the thing I'd say is, I think there are breakout stars. They're just not given the opportunity because I can name you, and like I'm sure Selina, you'll be able to as well. Like
Yeah.
even if you're in para athletics, you'll be able to think of probably 10 people that could be worldwide celebrities, but they're not given the platform, they're not given the chance. And um, this is part of one of my problems. Like, for example, you'll go into a Nike shop and you'll see they have a mannequin with a blade to almost promote like their shoes. But then, I'm not sure if you saw online, Steph Reed was having a big problem at Nike because they don't sell one shoe. You have to buy them in a pair. So it's one like companies are incredibly happy to say, oh, we do this, we love disabled athletes. But when it comes down to it, like when it actually comes down to it, they don't. Because they would promote these stars.
Yeah, it's definitely a complex situation, and it's been the same way for a long time, to be honest. Now it feels like, they've been including events into the Diamond Leagues and such. I mean, I did it back in 2016 London Anniversary Games, which was part of the Diamond League, and then we did have, in my race anyway, we had a couple of Brazilians, but it it is so confusing with the classifications when they just do put on an exhibition race, because the commentators don't understand the classification system, and they don't understand, who is actually running well and who's got what impairment. It's done so quickly, and it really doesn't do parasport justice. Yeah, it feels like a bit of a tick box exercise, but then we should be grateful because we've been included in a mainstream event. It's a bit of a mess, to be quite honest.
You're right. It is because it's at the moment, like for example, the Diamond League we had a month ago, we had 4 athletes that ran 10 point in the men's race. We had 4 athletes that ran 10.seconds, but then 4 athletes that ran slower, like 12, 13 seconds. Now it's guys that ran 10 point are better than them. It's that they've got different impairments. And it's like say, we're trying to do a couple of things, and we're not necessarily doing the best we can do in all areas.
And they've tried doing the kind of, you can tell me what it's called, the Grand Prix for parasport specifically, but I don't think they've really got the media attention that they were hoping for, that would give.
Yeah, they don't. But even with the IPC Grand Prix, is like you want to go compete at one of them, and you're spending £500 upwards on entry and accommodation. And some of them, the level, like it's not like you go into a big stadium with packed out fans and the best possible chance to compete fast. A lot of the time, the organisation is actually worse than you would get at a meet in the UK. So you're paying all this money to do this, but then you look at the Olympic side of athletics, the able-bodied side, and they're not paying £500. They're getting paid £500 just to show up on the start line minimum. So then it's like the disparity in Paralympic to Olympic is just honestly crazy. It really is crazy.
And like obviously London 2012 was kind of a bit of a breakthrough for Paralympics and awareness. We filled out the stadiums. It got a really good response. I feel like people said Rio wasn't quite as good, and obviously then Tokyo there weren't any crowds at all. Do you feel like Paris has got a big job to do to bring parasport back, if you like, into the limelight?
Yeah, it's actually a really good point you raised, because I guess when you put it like that, like London was great. Rio, I mean, 2 weeks out, they were debating whether they're even going to host the Paralympics or not do it. Tokyo, like you say, no spectators because of COVID. So it probably is going to be a bit of a marker to find out globally where we are with parasport. Because if the stadiums are 80% full or higher, then yeah, we're good. If they're struggling to sell tickets and there's a lot of empty seats at the sessions, then we've obviously not not capitalised on the position that London put the world of parasport in.
Is there anything
And
you
actually,
think could help
sorry.
sell tickets for Olympic Games?
Yes, I do, but I don't think it's something you can do now. I think that, like previously you mentioned about global superstars, and like you say, like London probably put Oscar there, Pistorius. Like if that was a different championships, I don't know if he would have necessarily got the limelight. So we have to probably do it in advance over a 3 or 4 year period. Like you haven't just heard of Noah Lyles 2 weeks ago. There's a sprint documentary about him that's come out. There's all sorts in the lead up. It's not something you don't start promoting a games 2 weeks out. So it will be interesting to see. Yeah, that definitely be interesting to see what the stadiums look like.
Yeah, I was just going to say we interviewed Sophie Unwin, who's going in the cycling to the Paralympics, and she mentioned that last year Glasgow did a Super World Championship, so it was the mainstream and the Paralympic events all mixed into one championships. And I know, like London 2017, London hosted the mainstream worlds and then the para worlds. This was all one event integrated. Do you think that would be a good thing for athletics? Do you think we could do that? Do you think it'd work?
I would love that to happen. I think even if we could mirror the host city of games, I think. I mean, and I still like, even when I verbalize it, I'm like, how is this not a thing? How is a para world champs and an IAAF world champs, how are they not hosted in the same city? Like the Paralympics are, the Olympics are, the Commonwealths are. But when it comes down to it, the bits that matter, the world champs, Europeans, where you grow the sport. Like for example, it's what day is it today? Like the 5th or 6th of August. We don't know if we've got world championships next year. It hasn't been announced. There's been no communication. We don't know the host city. And I'm just like, why does this situation happen? So I don't know if it's that the World Parathletics don't necessarily want to grow the sport. They don't have the best intentions, or if it's a funding thing, or I don't know what it is. But like you mentioned there with the cycling, it should really be, it should really be together.
Yeah, agreed. I think we're going to have to start drawing it to a close. I do have one final question for you. Did you write your own Wikipedia page?
No, but I did have to edit a couple of bits.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah, I did have to edit a couple of bits because there was a few things on there that were incorrect. Because every time I go on an interview, it would say I was a model, and I'd get asked, "Oh, like you do modeling." So I just got a job at working for CACI as an accessibility lead. So about 2 months ago, I had to there was a modeling line, and I had to email someone. I don't even know who it was. I found them on like a Google, and I was like, "Please, can you swap this line out for this one?" I sent them the things. I was like, "Look, please." So I mean, I'm not savvy enough to edit it, but yeah, so someone changed that line for me.
It's not the worst thing though, is it? Being asked if you're a model all the time.
No, it's frustrating. It was frustrating because I was just like, it would happen every time, and I'd just be like, and it's fine if it's just like an edited, but if it's like a live interview, I'm like, no, I don't do that.
Selina, anything before we wrap up?
Final question again, I guess. What bit of advice would you give to, because especially in athletics, we have hardly any visual impaired athletes at the moment. It's just you and Zach Skinner, I think, going for Paris. What advice would you give people with any disability getting into parasport?
I'd say that I think sport can change your life. And especially if you have a disability, there's so much confidence that sport can bring you, whether it's a social network or just genuinely like the confidence that you can do something that you didn't think you could. I think if you're visually impaired, like if you go online with British Blind Sport, RNIB, there's options on there to help find guide runners. If you're scared of going to a gym, for example, for the first time, try and find someone that can come with you, make it a comfortable environment, because there's definitely things that we can do, but sometimes you just need the confidence to do it.
think that's a good way to finish. So no, thank you so much for coming on, and obviously really good luck for Paris. I'm so glad you finally made it.
No, thank you.
I know it's going to mean a hell of a lot when you're there, and enjoy the experience.
No, thank you.
Very much.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, best of luck.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening to Seesaw Podcast. Your feedback and comments mean a lot to us, so if you'd like to get in touch, you can do so in the following ways.
You can find us on X at Seesaw Pod, Facebook, Instagram and YouTube at Seesaw Podcast. You can email us at seesawpodcast@gmail.com and you can stream with us live every week on Twitch at Seesaw Podcast.
Remember to like, rate, review and share with a friend.
This podcast was recorded in front of a blind audience.